Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Fantastic to have you here again. I've just set everything up so it's live, hopefully. So for those of you watching on Facebook, it should be live on there for you as well. I'm also recording this session, so it will be available also in the Vimeo folder. Day two, we covered Introduction to Agile Project Management. So I'll also be uploading that video that we did yesterday up to the Vimeo folder. So if you're playing catch up, don't worry, they will be either in the Vimeo folder for you to watch on replay, or in the Facebook group, the Supermums Facebook group. So either of those places. I've also put in the Facebook group a feedback post. So if you search for day one or day two, it should come up with a post. I'd love your feedback about what your key takeaways were. What was the thing that stood out from you from this topic? What resonated with you? What is a key action you're taking away? Any reflections or takeaways? It'd be lovely to see what everybody's getting from it, and hoping it's proving useful for you. So tonight we're going to be covering Introduction to Change Management. It's actually one of my favourite topics. I think it's so important to bring people along on the journey with you, because actually doing Salesforce implementation isn't just about the technology. It really is about making sure that you are enthusing and engaging the people on the journey who are going to be using the system long term. And the reason that change management came onto my radar and I realized it was an actual thing and a discipline to kind of learn about, was that in my early days of consulting, and I was in my early 30s when I started doing consulting, I found myself in a room of senior leaders, which is quite the norm when you're starting out. And that's quite nerve-wracking to be in, because you're kind of holding the fort, facilitating this meeting with a lot of managers. And it was the first time that I realized not everybody was excited about Salesforce as you would anticipate. You kind of want everybody to be there and ready and gearing up for it. But the reality is often that's not the case. There will be some managers in the room that aren't quite on board with it. And so I was in that position of going, okay, well, how do I handle this? How do I change hearts and minds? How do I facilitate this differently? But what is the steps I need to take? And I think the other thing that came from that also was I needed to know how best to understand different organizational cultures, and also how to prepare the exec sponsor, the leader. What was their role? How did they need to change hearts and minds in the organization? Because sometimes it's definitely not always down to you as a consultant to do. You have a role to make sure that people feel that they can trust you, and that that you're going to take them on a good journey, where they're going to get what they want. But equally, the exec sponsor needs to know how to deliver that trust equally to the organization. So within change management, you cover all those tools and techniques. I did a week-long course on change management. It was absolutely fantastic in that it threw a lot of different theories and tools and techniques at you in no particularly ordered way. So it was just kind of blown away by all the different stuff. But then you were like, okay, well, how do I apply this in practice? And I'm somebody, because I think when you work in systems, you seem to be quite structured in your approach. I came away and literally wrote a change management process for dealing with Salesforce implementations. I spent a good 2 or 3 days writing this all out, formulating it, and that's what I'm going to share with you tonight. I obviously won't dive into all the tools and techniques, but I will touch on actually what all those tools and techniques are that are quite important to consider with change management. So you'll certainly get that high level overview of all the things that you should be thinking about in a change management plan. And it's quite sort of structured in a way that it's not linear, because you need to kind of tackle things at simultaneous times. But it makes you think about what you need to cover at each different stage. So it is one of my favourite topics. I think it's massively overlooked in the ecosystem as a key discipline and tool. But I think it is really, really important to kind of have an understanding of all the things that I'm going to talk about tonight. So hopefully you'll get some good takeaways. I've also got one of our course alumni joining us, Melissa, sharing her experience. She's a Salesforce project manager within a US consultancy now, but she will also touch on how change management, has come into play with that as well, and how she uses it alongside different skills. For those of you that haven't met me yet, I'm Heather Black, CEO of Supermums. I have run a consultancy for 8 years, helping non-profits, and grew a team of consultants underneath that. I now focus solely on supermums, and I really, really enjoy training people up in all these different skill sets. I think over all the years of being an independent consultant and then building a team and making sure that the team of consultants were consistent in our approach, I designed, a lot of different templates, a lot of quick check sheets, questions and processes, and really condensed a lot of the courses that I did. So I spent 10 grand on different range of different courses, which probably was a collective of 8 to 10 weeks of training in total. And I've condensed a lot of that and all those techniques, but in a manageable sense, that these are things that you really need to know as your minimum. And I now deliver that training through our Supermums Consultancy Skills course, which I will touch on at the end of this session. And also as part of our business analysis level 4 qualification, which is something that's just delivered in England per se, whereas the consultancy skills course we deliver globally. So I'm hoping I can add a lot of value, and Melissa will be able to share her experience as well as part of it. I think one of the things, just to kind of add, actually, I've been at an workshop all afternoon with Salesforce and some of the leading consultancy partners in the UK. And we've been talking about the talent shortage and the skills gap. And part of what I was saying is there is a lot of people in the ecosystem that are still actually looking for jobs. And I was like, well, what's the barriers to kind of getting people through? And part of their barriers is if people have just got the admin cert, they're not ready to go out and be billable. They haven't got the range of skills, and it takes, from the salaries that they're looking for and what they need to do to ramp up, there's a bridge. So I think the reality is, and I've certainly seen this with, some of our trainees that have come through our program, if you can upskill yourself more and get more equipped, like with all these additional skills like business analysis, agile project management, change management, etc., it's easier for some of the consultancies to take you on, because all of the companies are desperate for talent. But there's this bridge between somebody who's just got an admin cert and somebody that they need who can go out on client site and get cracking. There's a gap. And that's what we're really talking about today. How do we bridge that gap? And I do really think that, just spending that little bit more investment in yourself on some of this training and sort of these additional skill sets will help you open the doors to some of these jobs that are definitely sat there. And because they don't need to ramp you up, you're already kind of ramped up with those skills on your CV, and then write them. I've always got my jobs through writing to people personally. But we also at Supermums, we have a recruitment agency operating in the US and the UK, and we work with a lot of these partners as well, and we can get you in the door. You have a better chance quite often if you go through partners as well, because we'll represent you, big you up, sell you, get you there. So in the emails that we've been sending out, check out the recruitment companies, think about these skills. Those are jobs out there. There's still a lot of talent who haven't got jobs. There's a divide. That's where I'm seeing the gap right now. So just a bit of insight from what I've seen today. Anyway, so let's get cracking on change management. Loads of useful stuff here, hopefully. So the 4 different things I'm going to touch on with change management is understanding the organizational need, the culture, readiness and history is the first point I've put on here. Now, organizational need is what we've covered pretty much with business analysis. It's the same thing. It's like, what does this business need this system for? It's a business case. So this is where there's an overlap with business analysis, because everything overlaps to a certain extent. The other things that you'd want to delve into, and you'd probably do this through the business analysis process, is what is the culture of the organization? And the reason this is important is on our change management course, there's 4 different types of culture of an organization. And for each different type of culture, you'd adopt a different consultancy style. Because it's important that you don't go in with your style of like, this is how I'm going to do things and it's my style and I think this is right. It's actually really important to understand the culture of the organization, which could be one of these 4, and to adopt, to kind of ask them, what is the preferred approach that I take here? Is it this approach, which is more, the organisation might want to be very top down, for example, in that the managers are deciding how everything's going to run, and you need to adopt that approach? Or is it going to be quite grassroots, and that they want you to do a lot of consultation with, staff who are kind of front facing, and they want that type of approach? And there's various things to consider there, but the organisational culture and how you operate and how you communicate and engage with different stakeholders will depend on the culture. You've also got the readiness of the organisation and the history. And it took me quite a few years to put this together. It's one of those things that I thought, why didn't I do this before? But actually, over the years of running a consultancy, I've seen pretty much a trend of about 20 different risks where a project can go wrong. And it took me till last year to write this list, which is like slightly ironic. But now what we provide on the course is a risk analysis with these 20 risks, where literally you would go through with a client and say, right, how ready are you? What's going on? Can I just run through these risks with you and just check that either you can mitigate them, they can be addressed, or is it something that we need to be aware of? And the history is, have they gone through this process before? Is everybody a bit fatigued with it? Is there just understanding what people's history of with Salesforce, with CRMs in general, with using systems, all of that stuff you need to be aware of when it comes to change management. So that's the first area. The second is about understanding different stakeholder personalities. So you literally need to map out what the different personalities and learning styles are of the different people in the organisation that you're going to be dealing with, starting with the management team, because you've got a problem if a manager isn't involved. And that example that I gave and what triggered me to learn about change management actually didn't end up with the organisation in the end. Because he was very negative about the system and on what was going to happen. So incidentally, you need to be aware of are all the managers on board? What they need to know what their role is as a manager, and what's the personalities beneath that. So you need to speak to the managers and understand what's going on in their team. And so you literally need to map out who's different, what's going on with those different people, who might be your enthusiasts, who might be your blockers. Again, there's 4 different types of personality style, there's 4 different types of learning style. For each one of those, you've got to think about your approach and make sure that you are adapting and accommodating all of those different stakeholder personality types. And there's different ways that you would motivate these things. There's also 4 different motivational styles that you can take. And so there's a lot packed into that thought process about how do I facilitate and go about this, and sort of make sure I'm communicating in a way that gets people bought into the system. The next area is about empowering people to lead change. And so I believe as a consultant, we have a responsibility to equip the exec leader with knowledge about how they should be leading a CRM project, because many of them, if they've done it before, brilliant, and they know what they need to do, great, sense check that with them. Most of them probably have never managed a CRM implementation or kind of be a sponsor of one before, potentially, so they don't know what's expected of them. So within change management, there is a set of 5-6 responsibilities an exec sponsor should be doing to make sure that they are leading the change and getting buy-in from all of the team below them. It's not just about giving money and saying, oh, here's some money and here's a team, get on with it. They have a role that is much wider than that. And a Salesforce project can go wrong because the exec sponsor hasn't really carried out their roles and responsibilities. Alongside the exec leader, you want to make sure there's a change management team. And a change management team will probably overlap with the business analysis and project management people, but equally also you've got additional people that might need to be on there, like HR representatives, like communications and marketing team. Comms is a big thing, and that's the next point. So you'll have slightly different representatives on the change management team. You would also want to make sure that you've got Salesforce champions within each department, because then they are holding the baby, if you like. Once you've walked out as a consultant, they know what was needed for that organization, what was needed for their department. They kind of own the Salesforce project in their department. And equally, you should also be making sure that there's a centre of excellence that's been set up to support the ongoing continual improvement of that system long term, that is owned by the management team, but also there's a way for users to feed into Salesforce champions feed into the Salesforce technical team, be that an admin, developers, whatever, and then that then gets fed up to the executive sponsorship team to kind of understand what's needed, and then they say, oh great, okay, brilliant, we'll give some money and pass it down. So you need to empower people to lead change. They won't know, they might never have heard of Salesforce champions, they might not know about Centre of Excellence, they might not know about change management team. As consultants, we should be making sure they're aware of that and enabling it, because that's going to give the project the longevity and the system the best chance of success to be adopted. The fourth area is a project communication strategy. Change management, another word for it could be communication strategy. Like, it literally is about, how do I communicate to different groups of people? How do I communicate to different stakeholder personalities and learning styles and motivate them? How do I, as a leader, how do they communicate down to everybody? And so it is about having a very consistent communication strategy, which is why I mentioned you'd probably have somebody from the comms and marketing team, particularly looking at internal comms, but also customers and partners if they're involved in using the system too. And with a marketing sales hat on here, you're selling. Sales and influential skills have a big role to play in selling Salesforce to users. You know, they've got to be excited about it and buy into it effectively. And you always say with sales, people need to see and hear things 3 times in 3 different ways for it to really sink in and for them to kind of buy. It's the same with Salesforce. So you need to basically be telling people 3 different ways and 3 different times, we're going to be doing these design workshops for the CRM because of why it's important. You know, this is going to be happening on this date. And you might need to do that in internal newsletter. You might need to do that at a team meeting. You might need to do that through one-to-one meetings or organizational wide meetings or whatever those different channels are. So you need a really clear communication strategy and making sure that communication about what is happening at different points is going out in 3 different ways, that is accommodating and is saying the right things to tap into the different audiences as well. So it's not straightforward. There's a lot to think about here, which is why I found it so fascinating. But you know, it absolutely makes sense. All of this makes sense in terms of making sure that everybody's bought in. And I talk about the 3 E's of engaging, enthusing, and embedding a system. They're the 3 E's I always talk about when looking at a system. I think the problem is if you don't do this, if the non-exec, the exec sponsor, doesn't communicate clearly or doesn't communicate the business case clearly, people aren't sure why is this important, why is it a priority, why am I going to spend time thinking about it, and so buy-in will be low. And it also means if the exec sponsor doesn't communicate clearly about why you're doing this, that they won't prep for the design workshops, they will probably ignore it, they'll probably not use the system. And so a lot of emphasis does lie at that executive sponsor level to make sure that they're communicating. It's not just about the consultant communicating, but it's about the consultant empowering the right people to do the right things to make sure that your job as a consultant is easy. That's the main thing, is look after, make sure that everybody's bought into everything so you can do your job in the best way. I think some of the other challenges that can come up is that if you haven't mapped out all the stakeholders and you haven't understand the organizational culture, and mapped out an approach to engaging with people can get frustrated that they're not consulted or they're not engaged, and then again they switch off from the system. Sadly, I've seen that. Sometimes it's out of your control, because when I've worked for top quite machine-led culture organizations, which is where management decide what's going to happen and then they tell the team below, there is a risk that people will feel disengaged because they haven't been consulted. But as a consultant, you've got to kind of put that on the table and say, look, if we do it this way, there is a risk of X, Y, Z, of them not buying into it. And then that management team can take it or leave it. But at the end of the day, you've got to do it in a way that they want you to do it. So, some problems you might not be able to fix, but as a duty of care, I would say that you need to put your cards on the table as part of an educational process to say, you know, we would sort of take this approach to make sure everybody's feeling brought in. But as I say, with organisational culture, they might not want that. Now, some of these things happen, the outcome will be, and you might find yourself in this position, sadly, but, you know, they might not get brought into the design process. You might then end up with a poor technical solution. The project might get delayed and the user adoption is nil and low. I think the thing is if you do your risk mitigation strategy and you explain X, Y, Z, and make sure that you've covered all those things off, that there is a mitigation wherever possible, and if there's not, they know there's a risk. And you explain to them that, you know, this is the role of the exec sponsor, this is the structure that we'd get into place, this is how we would recommend doing elicitation and involving different people. As long as you've covered all that stuff, you've covered your back. And if they don't want to go with any of those approaches, then they've made that decision, not you. You have done your advisory role, which is what you should be doing as a consultant, but then you're not responsible for a system not being used, etc. So the main thing is that you're kind of aware of everything, educated them, but you're not holding responsibility for something. So with the 8 steps to change management, this is what I put together. As I say, when I did the course with APMG, it was just sort of everything was just thrown at you in no particular order. It was fascinating, but I came away going, oh my God, I don't, you know, how do I take all of this and use it for a CRM project? Because it would just literally was sort of looking at so many different things in the same no particular order. So I've pulled in all the different tools and techniques and put them together in a very sort of clear, what I feel is a clear approach of analyze, which is about rationale and readiness. So how do you analyze the organization and look at the rationale for what they need, which is the business case, and the readiness of the organization. You've then got the planning stage of change management. So this is about looking at the approach you're going to take and how you set up and form a team in the best way. So it also looks at team, you know, how do you form a team and how does a team work? It then moves through to strategy. So that looks at how the leader can move forward and what the leader's role is, that exec sponsor, and how, as a consultant, you facilitate the strategy to make sure it's adopting different personalities, learning styles, motivational options. So which ones do you want to go down? And then it's the final bit is change. So once you've put the system in place, how do you prepare people that this is now here in the best way? And how do you embed change? So under each of these 4 areas, I cover all these different aspects. So under analyze, with rationale and readiness, we look at a business case and there's a couple of tools and exercises which are fantastic here around the SWOT analysis, the PEST and KPIs. And then under risk analysis, as I mentioned, I have put together a risk analysis spreadsheet. But on a high level, you're looking at culture, history, politics, authority, process, people, structure. There's a whole set of questions underneath this that helps you understand, well, where do the risks lie? And this is really great, really important exercise to do with a customer, as I say, so they're aware of where all the risks are, because they won't have a clue quite often. You know, they won't know where risk will be. So if you have this approach with them where you talk through all the risks and you look to mitigate them, you know, that's a fantastic start to a relationship where you're kind of being really clear about making sure that you're solving any problems before they even happen. On the plan, which is the approach and team, you would create a stakeholder engagement strategy, and you would look at how you would look at things like who is the influencer, so who's instigated the project, because quite often there's 4 different types of influencer in an organization, and depending on the type of influencer, you would adopt a slightly different approach. Based on the management approach, so there's 4 different types of management culture and approach, you would adopt a slightly different approach as a consultant. And then you need to look at the stakeholder buy-in. So that sort of reflects back on where are people sitting, you know, there's 4 different categories, one being like the champions and those being the blockers at the sort of other end of the scale. So who are your stakeholders and how do you engage them? And a lot of this is underpinned by, you know, who is driving this and what the culture is. And then you've got an implementation strategy for your team. So the things, as I say, mentioned here is make sure you've got a change management team into place. But if you are putting teams into place, which you will have teams across project management, change management, and BA, and all of those might come together as one big team, there are very important sort of methods of setting up a team for success, making sure there's roles and responsibilities and a set of other things. And this change management course that we run and I learned about, goes through all of that to make sure that you are setting up a team in a very structured way, so everybody's clear on what they're doing and how they should work. Moving through to strategy and lead and facilitate, the things that you would be covering here is what is a leadership strategy. So you'd be sitting down with the exec sponsor and talking through with them what their roles and responsibilities are, and you'd be making sure that there is management buy-in across the board. If there isn't management buy-in, you need to speak to the exec sponsor and start to discuss, like, what do you do in a situation if a manager's not brought in, because the likelihood is that that system won't fly. And so that's escalating and it's out of your hands, but it's something that you would need to address rather than just ignore and sort of crack on. And then you've got the communication strategy, which you need to have in place. These are all outputs of the change management process. Within the communication strategy, you'd want to think about motivational styles, learning styles. Also, I haven't touched on this, but that two-way communication. So I've talked about communicating something 3 times as an output to somebody, but equally you also need to think about two-way communication styles. So if you're pushing communication out to them, how do they feed back to you at different levels? And this might be through the design process, through the build, or through the training. And beyond that, what is going to be that two-way feedback loop in different ways? So that's what you cover in strategy. And then the final thing is the change section, which is prepare and embed. So here you want to look at the adoption strategy. So how do you, there's various points that I normally would cover on this around demonstrate readiness and success. What's the process going to take? Who are the people that need to be involved? And how do you prepare for rollout? So there's that adoption strategy approach. And then you've got an implementation plan. An implementation plan is really about how do you set this up for success long term? So who's the ongoing support team? How do you institutionalize change? So you talk about stick and carrot approach sometimes with this. Do you need to change contracts? Or do you need to introduce gamification? Or, how do you kind of get people now using this as the norm? How do you establish a change culture? And that's really about encouraging and supporting change long term and making sure that everybody feels comfortable with change. How do you do quality control process to make sure everything is working as it should be and everybody's still using the system and adopting it and not switching off from it? And then the final thing, which is hopefully the nice thing that you'd want to do, is evaluate success. And that evaluate success typically might come 6 months, 1 year, 2 years down the line, depending on how it's being embedded in the system, or how it's being embedded in the organization, and how they're using it. So as you can see, there's loads of stuff to think about here that quite often just, wouldn't be on your radar or you wouldn't necessarily sort of think about. And that's why, all of this is so important to kind of making sure that people are on that journey with you and they come out happy. I mean, that's what I said yesterday, is you want people to be happy. So you, as a consultant, in your toolbox, you need to have some of these strategic templates. You need to have appraisal templates around risk, around stakeholders, around organization. You need to know what questions to ask. You need to have sort of an idea about what a communication strategy would be. So again, you can sort of recommend what might be included there. And you would want to make sure that you've got systems and tools to facilitate change, to have those two-way communication channels to kind of set people up for success. So everything we've talked about, you'd want to have these in your toolbox that you can apply, and it just becomes second nature, really. It's not something that you have to really sort of think about too intently. So I'm hoping that the poll will work tonight. I don't know if it's something to do with going to Facebook Live, but let me see. We've got a little poll. Oh yeah, I can do it now. That's good. So I'm going to launch a poll for you. What I'd like to do is just reflect on, from a very confident dark green to a low confidence or no confidence 5, how confident do you feel adjusting your style of delivery for different personalities, organisation, culture, and different learning styles to make the project run smoothly? Is that something you've thought about before? Would you know how to do that? Where are you at? And then the second question is, how confident do you feel managing and communicating with clients throughout a project to keep them enthused, excited and engaged? My 3 E's throughout a project to establish buy-in and user adoption. So how do you feel about those? So thank you. I can see the polls coming in now. So fairly confident and low confidence are coming up top, similar to most days actually this week at the moment. So you're all about fairly around the same time. So it's interesting. So things to learn. I mean, I hope that what I'm thinking is this is obviously being useful because you're kind of not aware of some of this stuff yet. And part of it is if you don't know what you don't know, right? So hopefully it's kind of shared, you know, and giving you that sort of information to go, okay, this is what I need to be thinking about. So thank you very much for participating in that poll, and that's part of our assessment workbook. So that's all good. So for any of you that are interested in our course, we'll invite Melissa to speak in a moment. We do cover change management on our consultancy skills course alongside business analysis, requirements engineering, agile project management and coaching skills and DevOps. We cover this whole suite of overlapping things and really condensed in a way that is, you know, not overwhelming, but actually gives you what you need to crack on and start doing that job. It's a 3-month course, but training, we structure the training so we focus on an 8-hour range of content each week. But also if you've got time and capacity, you can just crack through that content quicker. We run weekly coaching calls where I do more added value training and also you get a one-to-one coaching session. And we cover a whole range of BA scripts, and one of those things being risk analysis frameworks as well, with a set of questions and things you would need to think about. So if you want to benefit from the course, it starts on the 11th of January, but we are doing an early bird sign up until the 13th of December where you can get 10% off using this code below. So that will be in your emails that are coming out to you. If you are based in England, you might also want to think about the business analysis level 4 qualification, which is an 18-month program. It's actually worth £18,000, this training program. So there's an incredible lot of content there. You get to work with some great guys at Learning Curve, as well as also getting support from Salesforce if it's applicable for you. And it's 8 hours a week of application that you need to dedicate to this as well. But this is, as well as some learning, it's also on-the-job training where you'll get to learn, you know, working as a BA in practice and building your assessment portfolio. So it's not an 18-month program where you're spending 8 hours a week at your, you know, sitting learning new stuff. So this is free for learners, but it's funded by the apprenticeship levy that is by your employer. So that's something we definitely have a deadline on that in the next couple of weeks to get people signed up. So please do on our website. Hopefully my team are online and they can put the links of those 2 courses in the chat for me. So Melissa, are you here? You can share.
I am. Hi Heather, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'll stop share so you've got the big screen. How are you?
Boy. I'm doing very well, thank you. I will have to admit that today is day 1 of our virtual holiday party since we're all remote. So I have the whole Christmas sweater, Christmas tree behind me. So, you know, for everyone who's like getting to meet me for the first time and thinks I'm quite colorful, today might be a little over the top than most days, but.
Wonderful. Can't think of a better reason. So I'll hand over to you, Melissa. Do you want to share a little bit about your background, your experience,
Sure.
what you've found having landed in this recent job?
Yeah, great. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to join. For everyone on board, my name is Melissa Seitz. I am a project manager at Liberty IT Solutions. My official title is Salesforce Project Manager. I do work on our Salesforce team. So we're really focused on how we can use Salesforce for solutions in our company. We are a system integrator, so we basically work with a lot of US government contracts and supporting the Department of Veterans Affairs in the United States. So it's a really cool place to work. I've been with the company since March. Before that, I was with an infant formula company for 29 years. Loved that job, but through lots of different things that happen in the world, that job was eliminated and I needed to find a different role. Basically, I had just went to Dreamforce right before my job was eliminated, learned a lot about the Salesforce ecosystem and how it was growing. I was already a Salesforce end user in my role and decided that it was time for a change into something different. So that's kind of how I ended up in this area. A friend of mine that I worked with introduced me to Supermoms because he had attended her session at Dreamforce, the same Dreamforce that I had went to. And I checked it out. I loved working with Supermoms. I've actually taken 2 of their courses. I took the Salesforce admin course to really understand a lot more about the platform and how to develop on it and use declarative tools and just the whole base knowledge of understanding Salesforce. And I was successful in getting my Salesforce admin certification with that class. And I also signed up for the consultancy skills class because I really thought that I wanted to go in, to a role where I'm either doing project management or consulting or something like that. Still was just a little unclear when I started. So I wanted to make sure that I had plenty of opportunities that I learned from Heather and team. And so I took a few minutes to reflect on, kind of like, how did Supermoms help me as I went through the courses? And I wanted to make sure I shared that with you today. And the first one is, just the understanding knowledge of Salesforce. Like I mentioned, I went through the admin course. I also learned some through the consultancy course, just from hearing Heather talk and the different things that the teams and the cohorts helped share along the way. That was really important for me getting into my role, because as a project manager or as any role with Liberty IT, they really want you to have your Salesforce admin certification and have a base understanding of what Salesforce is like so that you can help drive clients down the right paths. And even though I have a team with business analysts on it and developers and Salesforce admins, I still find that having that base knowledge is so helpful in what I do in my day-to-day role. And then the knowledge of the consultancy skills. Heather talked a lot about change management today. I cannot tell you how many of those points resonated with me and things that I'm using as she was going through it. One of my favorite statements that I learned a long, long time ago is the system that they have is the worst system in the world until it's time to replace it. And then it's the best system that ever existed, because you'll have a lot of people who are a little scared of change. And, they don't know what they don't know, but they know what they know really well. And so they're comfortable with it and they don't like it until you tell them that it's going to go away. And so really taking that time to understand, a change management process and how to get your users engaged and, how to really support adoption and the entire project and the trust and things that go with that. I learned a lot of those points, through Heather's course and just kind of understanding how to navigate through that and the tools that she provided. So there's really some, great information through going through the consultancy course. So she talked a lot about communication, and I have a team right now that's a very small team. And so communication is important for this team so that we can get those end users to understand how to share with us what their pain points are and their needs, and then how to communicate information up and through multiple levels. I'll tell you that on this project, I work with my end users every day or two, depending on where we are in the project. And then I also have to communicate our statuses and our risks and our change management needs way up through some executive leadership, which is pretty high up in the VA organization. So, just kind of understanding how to assess what your project is going through, what your risks are, and then how to communicate that, and just learning that it takes, up to 3 times in 3 different ways to be able to communicate is really helpful, as you're going through these roles. And then the other thing that was really, really valuable, which you don't even think about, which is a benefit that Heather may not even talk about, is just the network that you build as being part of a class. I've met people that I continue to talk to on, a weekly basis. My cohort from my admin role, we're still on WhatsApp and all the time congratulating each other, lifting each other up, telling each other of different opportunities for those people who are looking for different things. And then through the consultancy skills, that's actually where I met a really good friend of mine who introduced me to the company that I'm working for. She had just gotten hired. She knew they were hiring. She was looking out for what they needed, knew some of my skill sets, and she was able to put the 2 of us together. And so, just the whole networking that you get through participating in Supermoms is a huge benefit that I don't hear talked about, probably as much as we probably should, because it's a great opportunity. So I would, highly recommend, as you're thinking about going through the process and how to, go down this path in your career, you definitely consider Supermoms classes. I'm still waiting till that I can take her next course with the Marketing Cloud. That's next on my list. I'm gonna have to get through a few projects at work. So probably early next year, I'm going to be signing back up for the next course. But good luck to all of you. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll put my, whoops, I'll put it in the chat here in just a second. But it's been very nice to talk to you. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Heather, anything else you want to make sure that you wanted to ask, or anything you think I should cover that I missed?
No, that's great. Thanks, Melissa. I think it just makes us, it just resonates the fact that every project is a learning experience, right?
Oh, yes.
It's like, oh my God, how do I do this? Or like, how do I handle that? And I think it's just, it's always a roller coaster. I think one of the things that stood out for me when I did one of my podcasts, because we've got Mums on Cloud 9 podcast, if any of you listen to that, but I did a session with Amanda Nielsen in the UK, who's a project manager. She said on every project, there's going to be a grief cycle. There's always going to be that, oh my God moment where things feel like they're all going wrong. And I think the problem is knowing how to handle that, right? And knowing how to, what is it I need to do to pick this back up? Which strategy is it that I use, rather than sort of thinking and going, oh my God, I'm walking, wanting to walk away. So I think that the more you can equip yourself when you're kind of holding the baby and kind of knowing which way to go with it, I think that's, what you've shared today really is everything sort of, you're learning everything, applying those different techniques. So thank you, Melissa, for taking a bit of time out of work and sharing that with you. Hopefully I'm taking away from your Christmas party. I'm worried now.
No. You're all good. We're doing something each week, and today is festive / ugly / holiday sweaters type of thing. Good. So yeah, we just decided it was fun to do a little bit of engagement now that we're all remote and trying to keep everybody engaged. And so really nice. Today's sweater day.
Oh, awesome. I love that. We had Christmas elves going around on our team WhatsApp group this morning. I was like, okay, I haven't done Christmas elves before. What do I need to do? I'm missing out. Anyway, thanks so much. We're just coming up to, we've gone past over 1:30. We're going to do that every night. Let's face it. That's why I did the Zoom calls to 8:45. So technically I feel like I might be early tonight, but thanks so much, Melissa. Lovely to talk to you again, and look forward to speaking to you soon. Thank you everyone for joining tonight. I'd love you to share your feedback and takeaways again in the Facebook group, and to hear from you all. Connect with me on LinkedIn, and hopefully we'll see you all tomorrow for coaching skills, which is again a different sort of layers on to change management, but gives another perspective and a bit deeper one. So thanks everyone. Thank you for your messages. See you tomorrow or soon. Take care. Bye.